All right, I'm just commenting on Tim Maudlin's recent chat with Kurt. Uh, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Jagamal, I think it's pronounced. On the Theory of Everything pod or YouTube channel, and I posted several comments. I don't know that my internet's slow this morning, so I just decided I would respond directly. But he references David Fowler's book, The Mathematics of Plato's Academy, but he doesn't. He got his first name wrong. He called him Donald Fowler. The one thing Tim Maudlin, he starts off with a discussion on the ontology of mathematics and the relation of arithmetic to geometry, or number as compared to geometry, and he favors a geometric solution with a Platonic mathematics, and he glaringly did not mention music theory, and this is the big bugaboo, if that's a word, bugaboo, about mathematical ontology. And he also didn't mention non-commutativity, which is kind of strange because, quantum physics, well, he talked about the wave function, but he didn't mention Heisenberg also. So it's like he left out a lot of information. One thing I was inspired by Tim Maudlin about was in a previous talk he gave, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or something. He emphasized that spin is not a wave, and nor is it a particle. And this of course, this gets into non-commutativity and asymmetric time. And time, I was just reading Lee Smollin's book again yesterday, and he relates asymmetric time to not just Roger Penrose's theory, but to biological time and various other types of time. But he focuses on what he calls fundamental time. So I'm pretty sure Roger Penrose got that term, fundamental time, from Lee Smolin. So the idea being that time is absolute and it's non-local. And both Lee Smolin and Tim Maudlin agree with the de Broglie-Bohm model of reality, which is what Tim Maudlin was calling beables, from John Bell. So the thing is that the other thing Tim Maudlin got wrong is he was talking about David Bohm, and he said that his book, The Undivided Universe, had some good things in it and was worth reading, but his other stuff was too mystical, with the about talking about the implicate order and stuff. But then he said The Undivided Universe was co-written by, and he couldn't remember. He said let's see, I can't remember the name he used, but But the fact is that the co-author was Professor Basil J. Hiley, and also the elite. Actually, I don't know if that's a fact. I haven't double checked it because my internet didn't really connect this morning. But as far as I can remember, it's Basil J. Hiley, and I haven't read that book actually, but I think I've pretty much I've read excerpts from it from reading Basil J. Hiley, and then their course Basil J. Hiley emphasizes non-commutativity. So it's a little bit puzzling that Tim Maudlin he focuses on Bell, and then he promotes the Bohm David Bohm's model of reality, but he doesn't follow up on how Basil J. Hiley then expanded David Bohm's into relativistic quantum physics using non-commutative math. And then that the non-commutative math is actually from music theory, from Alain Khan's. And that takes you back to the ancient Greek mathematical ontology. So Tim Maudlin, he mentions how he starts off saying how the ancient Greeks didn't use the number one, or didn't consider one to be a number. But he neglected to mention that the number one was actually seen as light, as the self, as a consciousness in ancient Greece. And of course, if we look at the mystery of what light is in terms of consciousness, then we get into Roger Penrose, like Tim Maudlin. He talked, his probably the most fascinating part of his talk was when he was talking about the asymmetric time in terms of general relativity with the light cones, which of course is from the Penrose diagrams. So I had just watched Roger Penrose's talk on Einstein, and he just briefly mentioned how the movie Interstellar was not an accurate portrayal of black holes, and somebody commented how that's super funny that Roger Penrose could debunk that Hollywood movie when Kip Thorne had been an advisor to the movie and had spent they'd spent years trying to recreate what a black hole experience would be or something. But basically, Roger Penrose, he's talking about he bases it all on the fact that mass originates from frequency because of the de Broglie-Einstein relation with where de Broglie took E equals h times, or Planck's constant times frequency, and then he took Einstein's E equals mc squared, and then he combined the two together, so you get Planck's constant times frequency equals mc squared. And then where it gets interesting is where you're dealing with light just based on frequency, and so that gets you into the law of phase harmony right there, where you have a superluminal time reversed signal as retrocausality. And this is what Penrose argues for. But Tim Maudlin, he mentioned retrocausality as being a possible ex, explanation of Bell's inequality, and that retrocausality was different than superdeterminism. And I don't even know what I don't watch Sabine Hasenfelder's channel because I've disagreed with her before. So I just think she doesn't talk about non-commutativity at all either. So at any rate, yeah, there's, I think, like, the one thing that I mentioned the biological asymmetric time, and Roger Penrose, he explains the ecological crisis because he's saying that gravitational entropy is the opposite of the entropy of matter. And so life on Earth is due to the power of the sun from the gravitational potential energy as negative entropy. And so the original heat of the sun is not from thermal-nuclear fusion, but rather the negentropy is non-local because the gravitational potential energy originates from frequency. The mass originates from reverse time signal. And this is the true dark energy. Whereas all of modern science has tried to decrease the entropy of matter. And since the entropy of matter is the opposite of the entropy of gravity, then logically that means that we've been increasing the entropy of gravity on Earth through science. And what that means is that the technology has been speeding up time. And that's obvious to anybody who, we know. It's like you have to, there's the technology was supposed to increase our luxury time or whatever, but it's been the exact opposite because now there's been a merger between work and leisure time, and because everything's blended together. And so the problem then is with the ecological crisis is on Earth is actually due to a fundamental error of science having the wrong mathematical ontology. And Tim Maudlin, he starts off talking about the order of number in relation to like geometric magnitude. And he didn't really clarify that you have to have a concept of units. In other words, mathematics has to be inherently materialistic, even though Plato was trying to claim that mathematics is not materialistic. And so Tim Maudlin, he says he doesn't really know the ontology of mathematics. Like he's trying to study it, but this is something I've discussed with math professor Luigi Borzicchini, and I finally pronounced his name correctly. But so he, Tim Maudlin, he's obviously he's saying, physicists, they don't want to talk about ontology because it really means or the beables. The beables is what really exists, and not just the what works as engineering in terms of quantum physics. And then, of course, when and then Tim Maudlin said that when when it comes to consciousness, he doesn't even know where to start, because it's basically like the double blind paradox, where you can't falsify it, so there's no way to even approach the problem. And this is what Noam Chomsky, in his interview on the theory of everything recently, that was around the same time as Tim Maudlin, he was saying he doesn't agree with the hard consciousness clarification, because the way the question is formatted as what is the sunrise, or what is a sunrise. If it's a particular sunrise, then you can explain it. But if it's a sunrise in general, then you can't explain it, because then that's the difference between your subjective consciousness and then what, as Chomsky says, the soft problem of consciousness is how to approach consciousness through science, and which would be, what is matter? What is the truth of matter? And he says we don't know what matter is ever since Newton, because the gravity was a action at a distance mathematical theory. And so that brings us back to relativity having time not being absolute, but quantum physics based on Lee Smolin and other work, actually, like the non-commutativity, then time becomes absolute again. And so the problem, this goes back to the mathematical ontology, because Newton was directly relying on Archytas, from Platonic mathematics. And so his inverse square law of gravity was directly from music theory, with this idea that if you have a weight 4 times, if you square the weight, then you get twice the frequency by stretching the string tension. And so the problem is so when you're doing like Tim Maudlin, when he's talking about geometric magnitude, he's basically saying, well, you can't say what the one is, because it's only relative to a physical unit that has to be agreed upon, some kind of measurement standard, and that's a symbolic standard. But he's neglecting to mention that Alon Kahn's non-commutativity is relying on frequency as the standard, so what he calls spectral density, so that the geometric distance between 2 points is no longer based on geometric length, but it's based on a non-local frequency of negative frequency and positive frequency, and then a time reverse signal. And so the common unit then is the speed of light, but in fact the irony of this is that even the speed of light, because the speed of light assumes a symmetric rest frame as a spatial measurement, and so when Tim Maudlin says, in general relativity you can derive the 10th parameter, or I don't know if it's a parameter, a dimension, or factor, variable, I think it's variable, from the light cones, and we are using the light cones based on frequency. So the distance is, as this is what Roger Penrose emphasizes, that the space time is defined by frequency as a time measurement. But so that's again the spectral density. But the difference is that the equivalence principle, it has to be non-commutative, and so the problem is when you're converting it back into a squared measurement, for a spatial measurement. So he's saying, well, you can derive the distance as a length, from this from the frequency, and this is the original mathematical ontology problem, that it's only solved by non-commutativity. And so this was the argument between Gerard de Hooft, the Nobel physicist, and Roger Penrose, the Nobel physicist. So, excuse me, they're arguing about what is the eternal black hole, and de Hooft is saying it's from non-commutative time and frequency. And what Penrose is disagreeing with is, well, you have to have matter in order to have a black hole singularity. There has to be matter. And de Hooft was saying, well, yeah, there is matter, but there's a difference between an external observer and internal observer to the eternal black hole. And so for the external observer, it has to be the negative energy that Dirac introduced, that it cannot be observed, but it exists. But the internal observer, instead of it being energy, it's frequency. It's negative frequency. And this is what Penrose explains this as the equivalence principle paradox with quantum physics, where so that the matter exists, but it only exists retrocausally as the collapse of the wave function, and that's what consciousness is, as light, the invariance of light creating the perception of matter. I got this weird thing on the screen. Okay, so the Penrose, he's still relying on the wave function that has an inherent uncertainty principle to it. So he hasn't quite taken non-commutativity to the deeper level. And I have to listen to more Penrose, because he calls it the twister googly problem, his palatial twister model. So I think he agrees with de Hooft, and on a deeper level. It's just that they have a different way of explaining it, because Penrose is trying to relativize quantum physics, whereas de Hooft is just working from quantum physics, but he uses the Fourier transform. So they both have their own idiosyncratic way of doing the mathematics. And of course, none of these physicists are focusing on the ecological crisis. And that's where things get interesting, because once again, when you convert to the watts as joules for energy, and you think of the life on Earth as relying on the solar energy, and then you define it by watts per meter squared, what gets left out is that the CO2 as global warming is being absorbed based on the quantum frequency. And so this is what Raymond Pierre Humbert, the Oxford physicist, emphasizes when he's studying global warming or planetary climate change, is that the quantum frequency is the key factor. And so the he says, this is what creates the 10,000 year time scale of carbon dioxide in the biosphere, because it's over half of it gets absorbed by the oceans, and then it gets radiated back out. And right now the focus is being put on geoengineering with albedo modification. So the idea is to spray fine mist in the Arctic so that it causes the clouds to reflect the sunlight. But this is to make up for the to try to refreeze the Arctic, and then to counteract the loss of the albedo effect, or the albedo modification from the aerosol masking effect from sulfur pollution, which is about which would double global warming as the switch to renewable energy, or the decrease of sulfur pollution occurs. But so the claim is that, well, the watts per meter squared of the solar energy is so much greater that it only takes a slight change in the watts per meter squared to offset the increase of the solar radiation due to the CO2 reflecting the photons as through the infrared radiation back into Earth. But of course, the infrared radiation is coming out of the oceans now increasingly, because over 90% of the heat is 240 zettajoules. And this has been the emphasis of Jim Massa, the oceanographer, and I'm sure he's frustrated because he's being ignored by the other so-called climate scientists, because Paul Beckwith is a laser physicist, and so he hasn't focused on oceans, because Jim Massa being an oceanographer, and then Peter Wadhams is, he's also a physicist. I don't know what his physics focus was. He used to share an office with Stephen Hawking at Cambridge, and so they're both focused on this aerosol albedo modification, to mimic the aerosol masking effect, and to try to refreeze the Arctic. But as Raymond Pierre Humbert, he's emphasizing this quantum frequency, so that unless the CO2 problem is addressed, then the heat in the ocean will just keep increasingly, it'll keep it escaping, because we already have enough heat already in the oceans to trigger the melting of the Arctic ice from below without decreasing the heat from the albedo modification. So the albedo modification has to be maintained for 10,000 years, or else, because otherwise, as we increase the CO2 emissions, it creates what Raymond Pierre Humbert calls terminal shock. Because if there's at any moment, if there's any lapse in the temporary techno fix of the albedo modification, then the Earth's climate would then be plunged into a terminal shock scenario where, it would be too hot for photosynthesis on Earth. So it's kind of it's a grim scenario, and it's one that most physicists ignore, and it all comes back to quantum frequency and this acceleration of time due to the increase of gravitational entropy on Earth, based on negative entropy from gravitational potential, which is from a retrocausal reverse time signal due to non-commutativity as non-locality, what Roger Penrose calls proto-consciousness. So I'm just gonna leave it at that, and it's things are gonna get more interesting.